We start tonight with a piece of music created in a French bedroom, which ended up in millions of bedrooms around the world. Oxygen, an electronic composition recorded in a makeshift home studio in 1976 by a young French classically trained musician called Michel Jarre. With subsequent pieces, including Equinox, he's gone on to sell 80 million records and expanded into lavish outdoor performances involving fireworks or son et lumière. He's played for popes and presidents and was the first Western star to appear in China. Michel Jarre is about to begin a world tour and, while preparing, looked back on a career during which, as a principally electronic composer, he's seen huge shifts of technology, from analogue to digital and in the range of available instruments. So I asked him, are there sounds possible now that were not available when he started?
Yes, probably. Obviously, tools are always dictating styles and not the reverse. It's because the 78 happened that Elvis Presley's songs were lasting 3 minutes and not the reverse. So in this perspective, I think that digital opened new ways of creating music.
Also, you remained quite loyal to the old technology. I mean, some of those earlier synthesizers you were using decades after other ones had come in.
Actually, yes and no. We all forgot what the analog era gave us in the mid part of the last century, for a simple reason, because these instruments just disappeared at the beginning of the 80s and they didn't have the chance to become adults. And it's a unique situation in history of music where a violin player in 2010 is still dreaming about a Stradivarius, an instrument created in the 17th century. A guitar rock player would dream about today Les Paul Gibson 58. But with analog synthesizers, it's not possible because they're even not manufactured anymore. So we sometimes are forgetting what we owe to this period for electronic music and music in general.
Clearly, you could not have known it was going to sell tens of millions of copies, but was there a moment of excitement with Oxygen? Did you think, I've got something here?
No, it's really strange because when you suddenly have such an impact to the audience, I think you don't realize that before. I mean, on top of it, this music was not the trend of the year. It was the beginning of punk and disco music. It has been refused by a lot of record companies saying, but what is this? I mean, tracks are lasting for 10 minutes. There is no singers. And on top of it, on the British point of view, record company, and on top of it is French. So it was not something that easy. And then it was a total shock, a total surprise for me.
When we look back, though, one of the things you'd done, you'd created an international language. If you'd recorded work with lyrics in French, that might have limited it. It might have been difficult to go to China because they were censoring lyrics at that time. That must have occurred to you quite early on. You'd created this music that could go anywhere, really. There were no language barriers.
But you know what's very interesting behind your question, if I can say that? It's the trap that our generations have been fall into, that the main genre of music are songs, and that music would be a sector of that. And it's the reverse. You have music, and the sector of music is songs as an art form. And music per se, historically, is music without words. And I think that instrumental music, or just music, is part of our heritage as Europeans. It's different structure, and obviously you are not trapped into a kind of narrative process. A song is telling you a story, a book is telling you a story, or a movie is telling you a story. Music is maybe the most interactive art form because it creates the possibility to create your own movie or your own story in your mind.
Now, I wondered about that story because even with instrumental classical tracks, people will talk about the Napoleon Symphony, the London Symphony, or whatever. You clearly think of structure a great deal, but do you think in terms of narrative in your pieces?
Not that much, more kind of in a more abstract way. Maybe it's because of my generation. I've been really influenced when I was a student by all what we call the lyrical abstraction, such as Jackson Pollock and Pierre Soulages and all those kind of painters. And I've been really heavily influenced by them. And when I went into electronic music, it was actually like doing paintings, dealing with textures, with frequencies, colors, to try to create perspectives and to try to create some kind of soundscapes rather than telling a story. It's the reason why that my album have generic title, but then they have part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I always thought a bit artificial to call one part of Oxygen Fool on the Hill, because it doesn't. I'm not telling necessarily the story of a fool on a hill, you know.
And in those performances, massive crowd you played to. To what extent does the crowd change the performance?
It's strange because, you know, I thought for quite a while in my life that the number of people would change something. And I think that by the end of the day, performance is kind of love affair between two entities. You have the audience on one side and the stage on the other side. And that chemistry works or doesn't, like in a relationship. And whatever the size of your partner, it doesn't change that much.
So even if you have 2 million partners or whatever at the concert, it's not significantly different.
What's different is the outdoor situation, that you have the sky above you, that you are depending on the weather, the rain, the wind, and we are sharing a kind of climatic situation, like sending us back to this old reunion meeting of people by sharing the same moment, that the moment of equinox. Sharing something that will happen once, and that was something that I've always been interested by, and it's what I'm trying to do for this world tour, not approaching this current world tour with a kind of formatted plan, but approaching as much as I can each concert as a one-off and as a unique moment that I would like to share that evening with that audience.
And in concert halls, they ask people to turn off their mobile phones. When you're outdoors, you just leave that to chance, do you? People's mobiles may all go off at various points.
Anyway, you know, like me, that these days you can say anything to anybody in terms of mobile phones. They're on anyway, indoor or outdoor. So it doesn't change anything. Some people are closing their eyes and focusing on the music only. Some others are dancing and moving on the most dynamic moments. And some others are just, not following everything except the screen or their mobile phones to be sure that they will have that in their own archives. And so the mobile phone is becoming a poor interface between the artist and the crowd more and more.
Because so many people are filming it and then putting it up on
the YouTube. Yeah.
Do you mind about that?
No, not at all. It's quite useful for me because I can judge live after the concert about the results. Even if it's not really well filmed, at least it gives a result.
Finally, we have to be careful of stereotypes about different countries, but when you go on a world tour, famously when you were in China, first of all, I think they didn't react, first of all, the audiences, they weren't used to being at a concert, but do you find the audiences very different in different countries?
Less and less. I think because of the internet, because of the fact that, for instance, the Asian crowds being influenced by the West, it's not the same thing that I remember. Two things quickly. In China, the first time I went just after the Mao's time, and it was really incredible because you had, Chinese audience is not peaceful at all. It's the reverse of the Japanese one. They are making noises and all that. And you had all these guys on the back of the stadium, just moving on their bicycles and just to grab some beer and sausages and all that. So it's amazing. The people are just exercising with the bike. And it's the way they were acting. In Shanghai, I remember the one night that they had an habit, quite dangerous actually, that when they are happy, they are taking their neighbor and they are sending the neighbor in the air, the five guys like this, and then instead of waving, they're waving with human beings. So you have actually sometimes strange habits in different countries, but it has a tendency to disappear, all this, to become more international, maybe unfortunately.
Jean-Michel Jarre, whose UK and Ireland concerts run from 3rd to 10th of October in Glasgow, Dublin, Cardiff, Birmingham, Manchester and London.